Ladies and gentlemen, we now turn to such a big subject, that of industrial competitiveness. This is such a huge subject. This is the subject that we have already heard today is going to underpin everything. So before we get into our discussion on stage, let me ask you a question. If you get out your phones for me, and I'm just going to see how you all feel. As Mr. Bourget said, the room is full of leaders. So let us look within ourselves and answer this question. So again, if you would point your camera app towards the QR code, or if you have Slido on your phone, you can use PowerPlay. So what we are asking you is, what do you see as the biggest external risk to Europe's industrial competitiveness today? What is that biggest external risk? Is it the rising energy prices and the supply insecurity? Huge topic, that one. Is it the geopolitical tensions and the trade barriers that we see? Maybe it's more staying on the global stage. Maybe it is that sort of the subsidy races that we've been seeing, the IRA, what Trump is doing, what China's clean tech push, how that is all coming together. Maybe, considering what you said earlier, actually it is the permitting bottlenecks. That's what the problem is. Or, here's something else that actually Mr. Bourget was talking about when he was talking about the transition from the old forms of energy to the new forms of energy and getting that just transition. Maybe it is the skills issue. Maybe it is looking after the people there, the workforce readiness. Okay. Well, we've had about a third of the room vote. Shall we see what you think? So what you see as the biggest external risk to Europe's industrial competitiveness today? Let's have a look. So very much an external risk. It's the geopolitical tensions, and it is the trade barriers. But actually, delegates, look at everything else that you voted for. I think that's really quite an even split. We've clearly got the geopolitical tensions out in front, but the rising energy prices, the regulatory processes, and actually 10%, 11% of the room is the skills shortages and workforce readinesses as well. So how do you pick your way through all of those different challenges? How do you find that considered approach when it comes to industrial competitiveness? Well, we have brought together people to try and pick their way through that and give you their opinions on this stage. But before we do, let's get a little bit of an overview and see what some of the areas are that our next guest thinks needs more attention. Delegates, please welcome the CEO of the Regulatory Assistance Project. Welcome, Catherine Dixon.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. What I want to talk today about is how we make good policy in a world where we can't. So if Europe were self-contained, we could build rational energy systems designed for long-term decarbonization, productivity, security, but this is not our reality. Instead, we're shaping policy as a deeply integrated economy, but with trading partners who have far better tools at their disposal. The US acts as the lender of last resort, combining trade leverage with real fiscal firepower. China plays the planning game, using state-directed investment to transform entire sectors. Europe, by contrast, has its hands tied behind its back. We've got fragmented politics, limited fiscal coordination, and the rules at both member state and commission level hold us back from acting at speed or scale. Meanwhile, as we've heard, the political backdrop is much tougher, trade tensions are rising, and of course, there's growing anxiety about industrial competitiveness. The risk now is polarization. On the one hand, those determined to prevent what they see as the second major wave of deindustrialization at whatever cost to our climate targets. On the other, those convinced that we must push towards net zero at whatever cost to Europe's economic competitiveness. State aid rules have become a focal point in this debate. And as a former diplomat, I feel compelled to point out these rules are not an inconvenient footnote in our European acquis. They're the foundation of our post-war economic architecture. Schumann's declaration reshaped the European continent. It was the beginning of a European industrial policy. The rules worked. They turned rivalry into cooperation. They laid the foundation for the single market and European prosperity. But they were written for a world where the biggest threat to Europe was conflict between old powers. And today, our greatest vulnerability is our inability to compete in a global race. We're not set up for it, but we need to be. The first challenge of any credible industrial strategy is very simple. Make energy cheap again. It's no coincidence that the single market was born during a time of low prices and abundant energy, but today gas is more expensive than the US and power costs more than in China. So let's be precise. The real challenge isn't just to make energy cheap again, we need to make electricity cheap, because there's no path to industrial competitiveness that runs through natural gas. The era of cheap Russian pipeline gas is over. What's left is high-cost LNG model. Even with new supply coming on stream in 2027, European gas prices will stay structurally above those in the US, if not Asia. Europe will never again compete on the basis of fossil gas, and we shouldn't try. Our goal, cheap electricity, max electrification. There'll be a role for molecules, ideally clean ones, but clean molecules are scarce, so we should use them where they're actually needed. Fertilizers, steel, aviation. Not for space heating, not for everyday transport. A smaller, smarter role for gas and hydrogen means lower prices, steadier demand, and a clearer investment case. Now, the second conclusion is that it's not just enough to have low prices. We also need low-cost electricity, an important distinction. When prices rise, the instinct is to intervene. Germany's industrial price cap was widely welcomed, but it's going to cost billions, and those costs show up somewhere, whether it's in taxes, debt, or delayed grid upgrades. So the real challenge is this: how do we bring prices down in the short term while driving costs down in the long term? Because once you erode price signals, you lose the tools that build a smarter system. We need those signals to tell us when to charge, shift, store, and build. Take them away, and you bury the incentives that cut long-term costs. Price intervention might be needed temporarily, but it's not going to get us where we need to go. Look at the deep intraday price spreads across Europe. I think upwards of 200 euros per megawatt hour in some member states. We've got curtailment and negative pricing increasingly common. Now, that's all the result of a suboptimal system. And it gives a message to industry. Europe can't guarantee affordable, predictable energy. So before we reach for the blunt state intervention tools, we need to fix the underlying structural issues. Public money has a role, but if we want cheap electricity and investable electrification, we have to get the basics right. So here's what RAP thinks is needed. Deeper interconnection. We need to turn offshore wind into continental resource. Much of what we are building risks underutilization. We have the 70% rule. It was designed to guarantee that most cross-border capacity is actually available for the market. Implementation is slow. We've got to keep a spotlight here and a credible path to enforcement. And if we want new cross-border infrastructure, we have to improve cost sharing so the country that benefits bears more of the costs. We talk a lot about flexibility. Most markets still shut out flexibility. Reserve and balancing markets are written for gas plants, not smart devices. Aggregators trying to pool EV chargers or building HVAC systems face outdated thresholds and timelines that shut out innovation. The Electricity Directive requires access. We've got to deliver on it. We need to align contracts with system value. Our investment tools still largely reward output, not system contribution. That worked when the goal was to scale renewables, but it doesn't deliver the flexible, responsive fleet we now need. Well-designed, two-sided contracts for difference are a smarter way forward, delivering power when it's valuable, curtailing or storing it when it's not. Belgium, Germany, Denmark, already moving in this way. We need to bring long-duration storage into the frame, but markets today don't value duration, so no one's building it. The UK is moving ahead with tailored support. Europe needs to follow. We need to increase long-term contracting, including 24/7 PPAs. Too many transactions rely on the day-ahead market, leaving supplier and consumers exposed. We need deeper forward markets. If suppliers were required to hedge part of their portfolios, it would help jumpstart demand for long-term contracts. Finally, we need to manage the real cost drivers. As clean generation gets cheaper, system costs are shifting from generation to grids and policy design. We need to get smarter about using the grids we have, better planning across DSOs and TSOs, stronger locational signals, more independent governance. And on policy, it's not about how much support we give, but what we spend it on, like two-sided CFDs, not mechanisms that entrench inflexible or fossil-heavy capacity. So finally, if we bring down energy costs, we do all this, the parallel challenge is then accelerating the transition of demand, including electrification of industry from 22% today to 60% by 2050. This is going to require a real mindset shift. The race will not be won by counting carbon. We'll win it by building industries. We should be careful about layering industrial strategy onto a climate policy driven by emissions accounting, a policy that's focusing on allocating costs, pricing externalities, and picking the cheapest abatement today. The logic of allocative efficiency, it made sense in an era of carbon budgets and marginal cost curves, but it doesn't build supply chains and it doesn't create scale. We didn't build the car industry by taxing horse shit. China didn't rely on price signals to drive batteries down the learning curve. It used targeted output-based subsidies, infrastructure investment, coordinated demand policy to scale supply chains, de-risk deployment. It didn't regulate the old, it built the new. So Europe needs to move from the invisible hand of the market to the strong arm of the state, but by rewriting the state aid rules to support innovation, not relaxing them in response to the loudest voices. So that means focused support on barriers to transition, output-based support that levels the field for startups and scale-ups and creates greater certainty for investments, that integrates trade, transition, climate diplomacy, especially in globally traded sectors such as steel. Europe leads in project announcements, but most haven't reached investment stage. The barriers are not technical, they're geopolitical. Falling global prices, Chinese overcapacity, unclear trade rules. Defensive tools like CBAM have a role to play, but they won't deliver what decades of climate diplomacy could not, a global price on carbon. So instead, Europe needs to do, as we've heard, use its scale to lead cooperatively. We need a new kind of climate diplomacy, focused not on NDCs and targets, but on accelerating technology transitions. That means working with like-minded partners, shaping emerging markets, forging the standards and trade frameworks that enable innovation and scale clean tech sectors where Europe can truly lead. Thanks.
Catherine, thank you. Catherine Dixon, CEO of WRAP, laying out a very complicated, very complex environment, geography that we find ourselves in. So what we're going to do now is give you more of the tools to work through that environment. And absolutely delighted to welcome our next speaker with the publication of the Eurelectric and Accenture report on industrial competitiveness. So to take us through this, to give you the tools that you need to address this environment, please welcome the utilities industry lead for Accenture, Andrea Falchai. Thanks, Andrea.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today to share the conclusion of our joint study with Euroelectric on electrification pathways for industrial competitiveness. But let me start by reminding all of us why electrification matters. Well, first, because as we have heard this morning, it helped reduce our dependency on fossil fuel imports, and therefore enhance our resilience against geopolitical events. As we have heard, we are still importing in 2024 13% of natural gas from Russia. And we have spent 370 billion euros to import fossil fuels. Whereas we have actually saved more than 100 billion euros, like we heard this morning, thanks to 150 gigawatt of new renewable capacity. Second, for climate cost related, the first European climate risk assessment indicates that Europe is heating at twice the global rate, as we are all seeing and experiencing with the severe weather events happening across our continent, and I have to say, especially in my home country in Italy. Those events have cost us more than 160 billion euros between 2021 and 2023. And third, because it's a good business opportunity. IEA found that the clean energy sector accounted for 10% of GDP growth in 2023. And Europe is projected to account for more than 1/3 of the global manufacturing heat pump capacity by 2030, doubling from the current 18%. So, being industrial emission 20% of European total emissions, and considering that those emissions, 3/4 of those emissions actually are produced by burning imported fossil fuels, it is clear why industrial electrification matters. So let me get back to our study now. The methodology we have used has been based on the industry archetypes and scenario. Business as usual, base and best case scenario, which differ based on electrification technology and electricity cost profiles from now to 2030. One of the industry archetypes we have analyzed is the milk powder production as an example of an industry which requires low to heat generation, low to medium temperature, around or below 200 degrees, and relies on diverse and low concentrated facilities. We have analyzed 2 countries, France and Denmark, to consider a different energy mix. And guess what? In both cases, electrification is competitive, as the cost per ton is projected to be between 20% to 30% cheaper than the fossil fuel option, already in the base case scenario. Base case scenario assumes that countries achieve their stated target penetration of net zero generation technologies, and that the electrification technology cost reduction is mainly driven by market growth and competition. Things are getting a bit harder when we pick the second archetype, ethylene, which is a highly concentrated, energy-intensive industry requiring heat generation at very high temperature, above 800 degrees. In that case, we have analyzed Germany and Spain, again with different energy mix, and again, electrification is competitive, as the cost per ton is projected to be 6 to 12% cheaper than the fossil fuel, but in this case, only in the best case scenario. The best case scenario requires a reduction on electrification technology costs of 40% to reduce the capex investment we have heard before needed up front. But it's still quite conservative compared to other examples we have already seen, like electrolyzers or solar panel, for which the cost has dropped 80% in less than a decade. So, Based on our findings, it is clear that the path forward should be twofold. On one way, addressing electrification technology cost, and on the other, electricity cost itself. Electrification technology, we all know, are more efficient, and we have just seen that they can be also competitive, but they normally need a higher capex investment. To reduce it, utilities and industry need to work together and find industrial processes that could be electrified at scale in order, as we have heard, to create this growing market condition that reduce the cost. In some cases, like ethylene, we need to do a bit more. We need to innovate industrial processes. But you have a good example also on this. Like the pilot BASF has developed in collaboration with SABIC and Linde for an electric steam cracking furnace, which went in operating last year. During the design and engineering phase, the collaboration approach has been extended to OEMs, who have been challenged to find innovative solution for heat exchangers without using steam. Working together and leveraging a data-driven approach led to an innovative solution which enhances electrification and therefore is more efficient and with lower emission, and ultimately led to a brand new product that now can be leveraged by the whole chemical industry. Moving on electricity cost, we all know that we heard that, to accelerate the deployment of grids and net zero generation technology. And we need to remove bottlenecks in areas like we have heard, planning and permitting. But again, we have good examples, like the recent NESO new connection reform, which moves away from the traditional first come, first serve approach, or the Easy Permits platform, which Europe has developed to streamline the permitting process by digitizing permitting applications. But again, we need to do more. We need to optimize the whole energy system, from distribution generation throughout the grids, storages, demand. The future energy system will be different from the current one as electrification will progress. Eurelectric estimates that in 2050, we will need flexibility for an amount close to the current power production in Germany. When we think about flexibility, we often think about consumer flexibility with heat pumps, electric vehicles, boilers, but we already have good example of industrial flexibility, like the one developed in Denmark for data center by Even and Schneider Electric, or the virtual battery concept developed by Nystar to adjust its zinc production to help stabilize the Dutch grid. We need more and more examples like this to accelerate industrial electrification. And therefore, we need actually to accelerate what is the, and we do believe that to do so, we need to take an ecosystem approach. Being to reduce the electrification technology cost, or to bridge the gap between electricity and fossil fuel cost, we need to find solutions to optimize the whole system for as many stakeholders as possible. This is how we can unlock what we call the hidden value of a system. So stakeholders need to work together and try to optimize the system by leveraging data and AI, which will help find optimal solution and boost innovation, like in the BASF example that we have just seen. So stakeholders need to work together, like utilities, industry, OEMs, policymakers, share data, and have the courage to change. So in conclusion, electrification is already a good option in many cases. We need to innovate in some specific cases, But if we take an ecosystem approach, we can make European industries more resilient against geopolitical events and related costs that we have seen, more decarbonized, which will reduce climate-related costs, and very importantly, more competitive by leveraging innovative technology solutions. So thank you very much for listening. And from today, following this link, you can download the full report. Thank you. Now, I'm staying on stage, and let me try to bring all this to life by inviting my today panelists, who will actually share their perspective, their projects, their challenges on such an important topic. So please join me in welcoming Kathryn McGregor, CEO of ENGIE, Marcus Rauramo, CEO of Fortum and new Eurelectric President, Philippe Kehren, CEO of Solvay, Rory Farrell, Group Head of Sustainability at Lakeland Dairies, and Joseph Anis, President and EMEA CEO at GE Vernova Gas Power. So,
indeed.
You prefer to stand? You can sit if you want. Okay, so go ahead, yeah. Here we are. Very crowded. For such an important topic, it's normal. So,
Come a little bit closer.
good morning,
A tight group.
all of you, and thank you so much for being part of that. And let's start with a very quick round of introduction in which you can perhaps quickly introduce your company and which is your decarbonization journey so far and plan for the future. Would you mind to start?
Thank you. So I'm representing Solvay. So I'm one of the non-energy guys here. I'm a customer. And Solvay is a chemical company. And we very often say that chemistry, is the industry of the industries. And so we produce products that are used to manufacture wind turbines, electric engines, solar panels, everything that you are talking about, and we'll talk about during the next 2 days, you will most probably find products from Solvay, either inside or to produce them. To do that, we are also consuming a lot of energy, and we're emitting a lot of CO2, so your question is very relevant. What do we do? Historically, with some of our businesses and some of our processes are consuming a lot of energy, and the plants were close to coal mines, in particular in Europe. And those coal mines, of course, have shut down, and during the past 30, 40 years, we purchased coal on the global market. This is not possible anymore. First, because it's too expensive, too volatile, and because it emits too much CO2. So the first thing we do is replace coal by primary energies that are available locally. This is very important. We cannot move to gas in Europe. It's not possible. We did it in the US because it's available locally, but not in Europe. So we use recycled waste, biomass, waste wood, everything that we can find locally, and that helps us being competitive. By doing that, we already reduced by a factor of 2 our CO2 emissions since 2005. But I'm not saying that to be defensive. I'm just saying that the remaining part is probably the most difficult part. And the last part will be about electrification. And this is why we need you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead with you, George. What is your view on that?
Thank you. It's great to be here. And for those of you that don't know, I'm with GE Vernova. We spun out of GE a year ago. It was our former power businesses. And our mission is to electrify and decarbonize. So I think it goes along very well here. We cut across all the various technologies from wind, nuclear, gas, and grid. So I think we have the power to play across. And you know, a lot of that is enabling, I would say, the energy transition, but at the same time decarbonizing. And we have a lot of technology that we're also investing in. So when we get to your topic on industrialization and how to electrify that, I think there are many technologies that we're working on that can support in those areas as well.
Which is great, as we have seen also the OEM could really play and help all the different industries across. Markus.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Markus Raaramo, and I'm the CEO of Fortum, and now the recently elected president of Eurelectric, together with Catherine and Georgios. But Andrea, would you allow me to actually raise a thanks to Christian and Leo and the fantastic Eurelectric team for the grand opening of this event?
Yes.
So thank you. I can tell that in our roles we did not have an idea that this is going to happen like this. So it was a wonderful, wonderful surprise. So a couple of words about Fortum. Our purpose is to power a world where people, business, and nature thrive together. And I think this is deep in the Nordic DNA, as we heard from some of the previous presenters. Really finding all the time that balance between people, business, and nature, making everything work together. So what has that meant for Fortum in the Nordic context? So I'll say one word about the Nordic context. We have a 400 terawatt-hour system that is practically CO2 free. So compared to many other discussions that we are having here, it's not about decarbonizing the energy system, it's about growing the energy system and making use of the competencies that we have. But Fortum's story, we are now a 47 terawatt-hour producer of CO2-free power. So we're 99% CO2-free. But we had gigawatts of coal capacity. We had gas-fired capacities. We have had biomass and waste to energy. So we have gone through the trip from fossil to biomass to waste, RDF, and then fully electrified. So now we are producing with nuclear, hydro, and we have a big renewable pipeline. And the key point is the customer focus. So myself and our leadership team, we're really spending time on understanding what the customers need. And on the back of that, helping them to decarbonize. And the key message is that whatever amount of power you need, we will make it available. We are developing new renewables. We have 5 gigawatts in permitting, tens of sites across the Nordics. We are developing pumped hydro for flexibility. We are investigating and doing feasibility study on new nuclear, plus other storage, plus flexibility. So the power we can make available. Bottlenecks have been mentioned several times. And this is, of course, land availability and grid availability are things that are key for our customers. And the way we have addressed that is that for close to 10 years now, we have been developing sites for our customers. So we listen to the customer needs in steel, aluminium, hydrogen, chemicals, battery factories, data centers. And a great example of this is actually our cooperation with Microsoft. So we started generically developing sites in 2018, and just 2 weeks ago I was laying the groundstone for 3 hyperscale data centers for Microsoft, and connected to that we will do the world's biggest waste heat offtake, 1.4 terawatt hours in total, combined with our heat pumps, with our electric boilers and water storage. So decarbonizing ourselves, decarbonizing the customers, providing them the grid, the biggest grid connection we can offer today, it's available today on our sites for customers, is 1.3 gigawatts. 1.3 gigawatts, it's available today if you want to come.
Well, definitely data centers.
So that's a couple of reflections on what we heard so far.
Data centers are definitely a very big play for all, and especially in Europe, hopefully to recover also from the US. And by the way, your journey throughout all the technology and this with electrification could be also a good case also for Philippe on chemical. Catherine, please.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and very, very pleased to be here also as a newly named Vice President of the Euroelectrics. Quick word to introduce ENGIE. So ENGIE, we are a large utility. We have as a purpose to accelerate the energy transition to a low-carbon economy. We do that in around 30 countries. Obviously, we are very strong in Europe, and we are very, very strong in Belgium here, where we have, in particular, some nuclear plants that we are operating together with the Belgian government. In terms of big type of activity, we have obviously power production. We produce about 100 of gigawatts across the world. About half of that is from renewables and growing, about 50 gigawatts of renewables. And we have as an objective to get to 95 gigawatts renewables and battery by 2030. On the downstream side, we sell energy, we supply energy to industrial customers and also to retail customers. And it can be natural gas still, but also a lot of power. In the middle, the key part of joining production and supply is infrastructure. So we are the historical operator of the gas infrastructure in France, but more and more also we are involved in power, because obviously grids are in dire need. There is growth in power grids, so we are investing and we operate about 5,000 kilometers of transmission lines in Latin America as an example. And we hope we can be part of this massive challenge of building grid in Europe as well, which is a significant challenge. On the grid side, I would like to point out also the decentralized part of grid, so district heating, district cooling as solutions that we provide also to our industrial customers. So that's ENGIE in a nutshell, with this very ambitious goal to be neutral carbon in 2045. And for a company that continues to be exposed to molecules, it is a challenge. So maybe I will just finish the introduction to say that when we look at the decarbonation scenario for Europe by 2050, very clearly electrification is a massive, massive lever. We need to go from 18% of power in the final energy mix to about 50%. So massive feat to electrify. But we know that there will be some molecules left in the system. So at ENGIE, we do push for, hey, don't forget the molecules. We're not going to be able to transfer everything to electrons. The molecules has some benefits. And maybe, Philippe, to quote you, what I like about this challenge of decarbonation of the molecules is that it does mean that we will produce it locally. So, for example, if you think of biomethane, we think in France it's about 20% of the natural gas consumption by 2030 from biomethane. Biomethane is homegrown molecule. So I think it will meet very nicely some of the requirements from our customers, because we do want to listen to our customers of having homegrown energy solution.
Thank you so much. It's interesting to see the journey of a traditional natural gas company towards electrification and green molecules. Rory, please.
Thank you, Andrea. Actually, I was listening to our colleague earlier, and he spoke about all of the energy people in the room, so I'm beginning to feel a little bit like the only non-energy person in the room, but that's okay. I work with Lakeland Dairies. They're a dairy cooperative on the island of Ireland. We've been in operation for about 130 years, since the late 1890s. We are owned by the dairy farmers who supply milk to our business. So 3,200 dairy farmers own our business, and we process around 2 billion litres of milk annually from those 3,200 farmers. We export to something around 100 countries, and we operate 6 factories on the island of Ireland, 3 in the Republic of Ireland and 3 in Northern Ireland, which actually brings up another slight discussion. I was listening to some of our speakers earlier. Most of our milk is processed through our food ingredients division, which focuses on the production of milk powders, which obviously was one of the products that you considered in your study. And that division, basically, at a very simple level, our process involves taking in milk, separating it into cream and skim milk, evaporating some water from the milk, and then drying the milk to make milk powder, which goes in to make a range of products such as infant formula, for example. We have other parts of our business that food service, for example, if any milk or cream that you've ever had in an aeroplane is likely to have come from Lakeland Dairies and the little pots or sticks that you might have. We've clearly outlined our ESG or sustainability ambition through our strategy Pathway to a Better Future. There are 6 pillars to that. The first one is climate action. The second one is sustainable farms. Also, there are ambitions around people and communities, supply chain, responsible business, etc. I suppose in terms of our decarbonisation ambition, look at in Ireland, for example, we have obviously the government ambition. So, you know, in terms of agriculture, that's a 25% reduction in carbon by 2030. On the manufacturing side, I think it's 35%. And like a lot of other businesses, we have set targets that align to the SBTi, have been approved by SBTi. So in terms of Scope 1 and Scope 2 ambition, we're looking at a 42% reduction by 2030, out to 90% by 2050. And in terms of Scope 3, we're looking at a 30% reduction by 2030. And I suppose maybe just to frame some of what we consider and what we talk about, I suppose the reality of our business and a lot of food businesses is that, you know, Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions make up less than 10% of the overall emissions that are associated with our business. The vast majority of our emissions are Scope 3 emissions, largely from the procurement of milk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now let's try to get back to the ecosystem approach we have seen, and let's try to understand how this resonates with all of you with a different perspective. I will start with utilities and then move for your answer from the industries. Markus, do you see any growing appetite from your industrial players in order to have a collaborative decarbonization initiative, or is still something hard to sell yet?
I think the ecosystem and the collaboration, that's exactly the point. And personally, I'm probably talking weekly to customers. It is exactly about the discovery of what do the customers need and developing that. And I think we're discussing here quite a lot about politics and regulation, but actually if we use the tools we have already, if we take EU for example, we have competencies, we have financing, we have EU institutions, so putting those to work. But the practical example, so just a couple of weeks back I was also in the US meeting 5 of the hyperscalers and basically pitching Europe and pitching Nordics for a location. And then through these discussions you discover that what is needed, and it is chips, it is land, it is grid, and it is infrastructure. So then this is what we have been engaging in, like I said, for a long time. So around 10 years doing that. So anticipating way in advance and developing something that the customers need. And that reflects also on the Eurelectric presidency priorities that are reflected in our manifesto. So the number 1 point there is industrial competitiveness and electrification with a strong angle on the customer focus. So for us in Eurelectric, it means that we talk with the customers, we engage with associations, with CEFIC, with CEPI, with Eurofair, and so on. So listening to the customers, it sometimes may be a little bit painful because you have to adapt and you have to indeed collaborate.
Yeah.
The second point on our manifesto is the security of supply. And that we also discussed how to use the grids optimally and how to ensure that the grids and the systems are robust and stable and available. So that's kind of a no-brainer. But then there is the topic that Christian also pointed to, and that's the hard security. And my approach on that is building on the Finnish example. So situational awareness, so understanding where are we, authority contacts to understand that what is the threat picture, you know, what are we facing, are we prepared, and then simply again it's collaboration, so exercising. In our company in the last 3 years we've had more than 20 exercises with the military, with the police, with the fire departments, and so on. Exercise, 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 and then also make sure you have the capabilities and competencies. So of course we have them in our company, but Finland just raised its age for reserve to 65, and that means that we have 1 million trained people in the reserve, 1 million. But that's also taken a lot of collaboration and work. And the third point is digitalization and AI. And again, it comes back to the collaboration. So when we get more intermittent renewables into the system, and again, this is a presidency priority, we get intermittent renewables into the system, we will be connecting a lot of customer loads, EVs, industries. There has to be demand response. We'll have to make use of the storage. So the optimization problem becomes enormously more complex, and going into 15-minute trading, everything will be quadrupled. So digitalization and AI on top of security of supply and the customer focus, these are all essential, and these are in our manifesto now. But collaboration, absolutely, in the heart of what we do every day.
Very good, thank you so much. Katrin, also on your side, I mean, you already are a leader on PPA's market, which is a good way to collaborate with industries. But do you see other ways in which ENGIE is helping industrial customers electrify?
Yeah, for sure. We are very proud about the position we have indeed on PPA. The reality, though, is that not everybody today can afford PPA because it's long tenure, 15, 20 years. So we need to come up with offers for the different type of customers that we have, and this is where our teams are working very hard. But maybe I want to go back to also what we are doing to help decarbonize the power system. I think it's very important at ENGIE that we develop what we call the smart electrons. And this concept is a bit of a fancy word to say that we are not here to do projects that don't add something to the system. So if, for example, in the south of Europe, we feel that there is too much solar project, we should not build more solar projects. Or if we do, we should make sure that they are accompanied with the right storage solution, which is going to make these electrons that we are producing at noon available when actually customers need it and want it. And so we really have this approach as much as possible of system, because we do think at the end of the day, this energy transition risks a massive backlash. And I think the minister said it very nicely, obviously with the acute situation in Romania, but even in our Western country, the risk of backlash against this energy transition, if we don't do it right, is absolutely massive. So I think every company here, and again, the call on our responsibility, I think, rang a bell, that we all have to make sure that what we do is contributing to the affordability of the final electrons. And thank you. Thank you. The other thing I want to share with you, because it's a bit of a piece of news, we have at EU level now, and thanks to the work of Eurelectrics, a lot of tools in our toolbox on the market design. And so if you ask me, what do we need to do more, I will complain about the fact that I do think that we need to have more flexibility, actioned in the system. And I know Leo was saying there are too many batteries. Leo, I promise you, we're not going to do batteries that don't help the system, but we do need to have CRM in the market so that we can develop those batteries, which are so important. But the one thing that I think beyond all the regulation and the policy and all of that, I do think sometimes we're missing a little bit political courage. When I look at some of the hurdles we have in France, just to build a solar project, which is an incredible solar project, which doesn't need any subsidies. It is so affordable, so competitive, that I can find customers directly. No need for public money, nothing. This project, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot get it permitted. We cannot get it through. And this is unbelievable to me. So why do I say that? Is that so? Last week, we published a poll that we did in France, because there is this thing in France that people don't like renewables. So everybody, wants to do nuclear. Nuclear is great, but we know nuclear is very long-term. So in the meantime, what do? We need to build new renewables. Well, the poll last week that we did, 12,000 French people with IFOP, everything perfect, 84% of French people have a positive opinion of renewables. And this is across the political spectrum. So you know how we think populist is dragging on the fact that certain people don't like renewables? It is not true. Even extreme far-right people, 77% of them are supportive of renewables. And the crazy thing is that this 80% goes to 94% for people who have renewable projects next to their home or in their areas, in their communities, because there are positive benefits from the project. So the point is, we should make sure that political governments do not use energy technology as a political battle, because the French people, and we had done something similar at European level, it is also true for Europeans, they have already decided they want this. So let's not be scared, let's just move forward and let's get this energy transition done the most affordable manner so we can keep our industries, our customers, our consumers in the money. So that's what we're trying to do at ENGIE.
Really interesting point, because it's indeed political could be sensitive of 94% of you have one point.
Just a short reflection. So excellent point. This is quite a dilemma. I think many of us are familiar with. So generically something is popular, but then the smallest common denominator somewhere can stop something that's completely sensible. And I think there's a fine line that we need to cross in the public discussion, which is that if we're going to compete with the US or if we're going to compete with China, be it what it is, but they certainly have a hunger to do things. They're doing it. We may not like it, but they have a hunger to do things. It cannot be that we only permit something or make it a little bit less burdensome. We should have a hunger to grow. There needs to be urge to grow, and this has been my clear message to also the Nordic leaders, the prime ministers, that it's great that you talk about smooth permitting. I want to see you to have the hunger to grow. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Because all the tools are there, the financing is there. We can deploy hundreds of billions of capital. We like doing it. We know how to do it. There needs to be the hunger to grow.
Let's now move to your customer perspective and see. So, Philippe, how this engagement and collaboration approach resonate with you, your company, your industry? Is there a good example?
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, I mean, collaboration with our customers, it's really in the DNA of a chemical company, because we're not selling a commodity, so we need to be close to our customers, see how they use the product, and work with them to make their process work. This is what we try to do as well on energy, and for every project we choose, the leaders in their domain, and we are also a big landowner, so we can, make our land available for example, solar or wind projects. This is something that we do. Unfortunately, at this point, for some of our businesses at least, the electricity produced by renewable is not yet competitive enough. So it might come at some point, but today it's not able to make us competitive on the global markets. So we are investigating other ways, but we're optimistic because this is what I very often say is what the pain sometimes we're suffering in Europe is mostly self-inflicted. And so we can have, very simple solutions to make things work, and most of the time they don't even cost anything. For example, today, if you want to produce energy from recycled waste, what we call refuse-derived fuel, you pay the same CO2 cost as if you would consume natural gas. What's the point? I mean, the recycled waste is there, available next to you.
They will anyway.
And it costs the same as burning natural gas. I mean, it's very simple. Just say it's carbon-free. And we have a huge potential on RDF. And I have a lot of different examples like that. For example, we don't use recycled material. We don't have the same regulations in the different member states on waste. So sometimes it's easier to send back rare earth in end-of-life engines to China than to send them to the next country to recycle them. So we can change things. It's very easy. We just have to be decisive.
And what do you think from your perspective? You mentioned that the electricity cost is still too high, right? What do you ask utilities?
For the electricity-intensive businesses, again, I mean, there are a lot of different types of businesses.
Yeah, we have seen that.
And today, Catherine is right when she says solar panel can produce affordable energy, but not for the super energy-intensive. Here, we need something else. And obviously, we are looking at all options, and one of the options could be small nuclear reactors, but that's obviously longer term. But here, really, we count on the energy players to support us, because I heard that the energy market earlier this year, this morning, is working well. Well, from our perspective as an industrial consumer, we don't think that it's working well, because today we need long-term contracts at affordable price, and the market does not offer this. If I sign a 15-year contract with one of my customers, I don't ask him to pay a spot price. So we really need to find ways to be able to make this possible, because otherwise we will have to invest ourselves. This is what we do sometimes. But if we invest in energy assets, it's not our job. I mean, it's not our business. It's money that we cannot invest in our core business. So we need energy players to support us. This is where collaboration is very important. I think we will find the solutions.
Definitely. Actually, what we have seen actually is by also including OEMs and technology providers, that could help also you find solutions that could, let's say, be more efficient, and then also reducing the electricity cost. Thank you. Rory, again, from the customer perspective, what is your view on that? And if you have any good example, or which are the plans for the future?
Yeah, so look, before I come in, I was thinking about what we wanted, which is usually what I do. And look, I suppose in simple terms, as I said, we've committed to a reduction in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So if we take that as being the starting point. And I was listening earlier to what some of the speakers were talking about, and I suppose in my world, maybe I'm wrong here, but the competition isn't so much between electricity and fossil fuels. The competition is between electricity and AD or biogas or biomass or some of those things. Because if we're looking at reducing emissions, we're not considering going to more fossil fuels. What we're considering is whether or not we should utilize electricity more, or whether we should, logically speaking, utilize a renewable gas. So that's more what's in my mind when we look at something. If we think then about the stability or the reliability piece, look, I think everybody wants a reliable, stable source of energy. The cows are milked every day. The milk keeps coming in the tankers. We need energy to process it. And look, we were through the crisis in terms of pricing like everybody else was. So in our minds, you want something that's stable, you want something that's reliable. But it has to be manageable from a cost viewpoint. And look, I suppose the challenge from our point of view really is the capex that's involved in deploying some of these technologies. So they make perfect sense. They work well on a spreadsheet. The paybacks are good. The challenge comes when it comes to writing a check for what has to be done. And again, this is not to be a poor-mouthed, as we say in Ireland, or defeatist about it, but the reality is that we are a low-margin business. So, in a low-margin business where you're generating profit of, somewhere maybe just north of 1% of your turnover of 2 billion euros, it's very challenging to write large checks for big projects. So, look, I'm not sure what the answer is. we have done a lot of the efficiency measures. We have utilized biomethane to generate electricity. We have significant deployment of solar. But I think maybe a message for people in the room is that there is a step change required from a lot of businesses or companies, and they have now set out ambition to 2030 and to 2050, and they're seriously considering what their next move is. And, you know, I'm guessing for most people in this room, they want electricity or electrification to be a strong part of the answer. And I think, look, there are benefits to it in terms of stability, reliability is something we understand, it's something we know, it's not dependent on feedstocks and on all sorts of things that maybe, you know, some of the AD gases, etc. are. But, you know, I think we are at a turning point in terms of what industry wants.
Good, thank you. Let's now stay in the middle with the technology provider, right? And we have seen that actually if you step in the collaboration, you can add a lot of value at the system and find new ways and innovate. Do you have seen any example like this from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think let's just start, though, with what's happened in Europe over the last 3 decades. You know, greenhouse gas emissions have reduced in the power sector by almost 37%. So significant reduction has already been achieved, albeit a lot of that has been from renewables and from shifting coal to gas. But going forward, I think if we look at some of the harder sectors that we're talking about in the industrial space, so if you go to petrochemical, steel, aluminum, those are harder sectors that we need to work on, and I think technology will have to play a role now. Renewables can provide for that, but there are also other paths of technologies, and some of the ones that we're working on, obviously, is enabling hydrogen capability, carbon capture storage, direct air capture technology. It's been mentioned earlier, nuclear small modular reactors. So those are all technologies that, as an OEM provider at GE Vernova, we're investing in, and we believe will have a role to play in the mix of technology choices to get to a carbon-free state in the future. You know, if I start with small modular reactors, it's not as far out as we think. We've been working on this. It's based on existing technology that we've been operating for many years. Our first project is in Canada. It just went through final investment decision. So I think that's a good example of a small modular reactor project that we're working on. Here in Europe, we have the Net Zero Teesside project, which is the first large-scale combined cycle power plant using exhaust gas recirculation to improve the CapEx and reduce on carbon capture. So that's another project that I think we're working on that'll have a role. Gas at large, I think there are still options for the gas that does exist and is running. There are lots of improvements that can be made in existing fleets, whether it's in improving efficiency of those assets, which ultimately will have an impact on overall impact on the environment as well. So I think those are all pathways and examples and technologies that we're working on that we feel will have a role to play and will continue to innovate. And as you said, I think it can't be solved just by one angle, right? It has to be collaboration of all the parties here to enable that.
Yeah, Markus, you want to add something?
Yeah, if I can build on what you said and the whole idea also of technology as an enabler. Again, I think it's a bit of kind of leaning forward and just kind of grabbing the opportunity, seeing what's happening and not pushing back and fighting back, but rather embracing the development. And I know it's difficult. It's difficult for me and it's difficult for our company. But we saw the impact of renewables in the previous presentation. A lot of low-cost hours in the system. Well, in Finland last year we had about 1,000 negatively priced hours, which for an electricity producer may look like a problem, or it can be a solution. So when we look at our district heating business, we've gone historically from coal to gas, which was okay, from dirtier to cleaner. Then from gas to biomass and waste to energy. And now with low-cost energy and electricity being available, go to directly electrified heating. So to put things into comparison, just 2 years ago we commissioned a 380 megawatt wind park, which is great. It's really super cost competitive, but of course it's cannibalizing itself in the market. Simultaneously in the Espoo district heating system, where also the Microsoft excess heat is coming, we have built about 300 megawatts of electrical boilers. Payback is less than a year because we get the zero cost hours or even negatively priced hours. So embracing the opportunities and building on that. To Philippe's point on the collaboration and some of the dilemmas, I think here's a point where EU can also just kind of lean forward and implement what already is on the table and has been agreed, and namely unleashing investments and unleashing long-term contracts by supporting PPAs. So even for us, let's say, committing to a very long-term project, not to mention new nuclear, which we also just commissioned a couple of years back, the latest one in Europe. Okay, if you need to commit capital for 10, 15 years, then it's good to have super solid customers backed by, for example, the EU guaranteeing the PPAs, because who knows who else will be around in 15 years' time.
For nuclear, definitely. So very good example, and also for Philippe, in order to see the future in terms of having affordable energy with PPAs that with a reasonable price, which we're asking for, right? So we are running out of time. Let's make a quick round just to say which are the action you want. Let's not think about nuclear, right? It's a long run. On the next 12 to 24 months, in order to facilitate industrial electrification. Let's start from your side and move around the table.
I think what is really striking is that we seem to be all aligned. You know, that we need the industry, we need to have affordable and decarbonized energy and so on and so forth. So now we just need to act. And to act, first we need to trust each other because we have, and I think Jean-François van Boxmeer said it very well earlier on. He said we have different worlds, you know, that don't necessarily trust each other. And it's a pity because we all want the same thing, you know, basically. Yeah. So we have very simple solutions that for most of them don't cost that much. And when they cost money, money is there. So let's trust each other and define very, very quickly what we have to do.
Thank you so much.
I think it was said earlier, one of the prior speakers this morning, if you allow the markets to dictate and enable investment faster, I think that is going to move the needle over the next decade to allow us to do this faster.
Thank you.
Focus on the customer dialogue. Understand what the customers need. That will unleash the investments, that will unleash the power. And use the competencies and institutions we already have in Europe. We have all what we need, we just need to put it to work and have the dialogue with the customers.
So from my perspective, it's really about deploying the capital. It's about 10 billion euros a year that we invest. So it's making sure that we deploy it wisely and build the right project, the smart project, the project that are going to be useful to the system is really going to be my focus. And maybe to bounce with one word, completing the trust, it's really, in my mind, so important. Trust, confidence in the future is actually almost as important as all the other stuff to unleash the investment. And that is particularly true when you think about the CapEx related to the electrification. It works on the spreadsheet. But if there is no trust or no confidence that you know what will happen from the political, regulatory point of view in 10 years, the spreadsheet will not help you decide. Look at what's happening in the United States. Difficult when everything moves to take that investment decision. So I think trust, confidence are critical ingredients for success.
Look, from our point of view, a lot of the preparatory work has been done for the decarbonisation journey. A lot of work has been done already. Heat pumps make sense for us. That's something we need to do straight away, where we haven't done it. So if we're talking next 12, 24 months, heat pumps. PPAs make sense. If we're saying that, you know, the deployment of capital is difficult, then PPAs make sense. Again, we've had some discussions, but it's certainly to go further down that road. One thought, and again, maybe it's for the policymakers in the room, we have been engaged in EU ETS for over 20 years. We have bought ourselves a lot of EUAs over the years, and maybe there is some avenue whereby some of that finance could be utilised to help to achieve the carbon reductions that are required. Just a thought. Thank you.
Heat pumps should be quite a straightforward one. So, thank you so much. Focus on customer, enable investment, execution with trust. I would suggest also to rely on data to build the trust. So we will change the name and rename it as the Trustable Ecosystem Approach, okay? Thank you so much.